Host disabled participant screen sharing. Oh no.
Oh, I need to make you a co-host.
All right, so we're recording. Yeah, hello everyone. Welcome to the Kubernetes SIG Storage Volume Populators Community Meeting. I'm attempting to share my screen. All right. Yeah, so today is the KEP merge deadline for Kubernetes 121, and we're trying to meet that deadline. And so a bunch of stuff has been happening in the last week. Thank you to those who've reviewed the KEP. So Saad, I saw you did an approval, and I don't know if you've been explaining things to Tim on the side or not, but he seems to have a very good grasp of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So the question for me is like, do we need to get Tim's approval to merge, or is that something that can be worked in parallel?
Yeah, we do need Tim's approval. So he's an API approver, and
Okay.
We need an API approver to sign off.
So basically, the plan would just be to hope he takes another look before this evening.
Yeah, and if you can reply to any emails that he sent.
Yeah, I've been trying to be responsive through all channels so that he's not waiting for anything from me. I do want to talk about some of the issues he raised because they're bigger issues, but just to go down the checklist. So Saad, you've approved on behalf of SIG Storage. I think David approved on behalf of the product readiness team. So I think because I pushed another commit in response to Tim's feedback, I think we're going to need to reapply the approvals.
Okay.
So I just I'll ping you and David again later, but Tim is the one I want to make sure is happy. So let me. Oh boy, how can I do this? Let me see if I can open it up here. All right, this is working. Let me put the link in here. Wait, why am I not allowed to edit my own document? What happened?
You can probably approve your own comments.
I've never seen this pop up before though. This is very strange.
I have seen this one sometimes. I don't know.
Huh.
Oh, maybe you know what? Maybe you see that there's a suggestion. There's a green thingy on the right hand side. Maybe if you
maybe I got logged out somehow.
No, can you just change that? Can you just change that to editing?
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful. All right. So yeah, we responded to all of David's feedback. David did the approval here, and Tim took a look. So yeah, he noticed in the commit history that we had a webhook and we switched it to a controller. We've of course discussed the reasons for that, and I think we're on solid ground here. We just need to get Tim to agree with us. I guess if he came back and said no, a webhook is better, we would have to seriously consider that. So he actually expressed a lot of dismay that the current behavior is that when you specify a data source that's invalid, we basically ignore it. And I think we all agree that that's sort of not the best behavior. But given that it's been that way since 115, could we fix that in a backwards compatible way, or are we stuck with the bad behavior?
Do you remember why it was that we were clearing it out rather than?
I don't. I'm pretty sure that it was John Griffith. So the first edition of the data source field was for volume cloning, because I know that we were working on.
It was actually for snapshots first.
Well,
then the clone was added later. Yeah.
We had the idea for snapshots, but the first alpha feature gate to go in was the volume cloning.
No,
I think.
there was a snapshot has a feature gate. Well, we have separate feature gate. There's 3 feature gates.
Yeah. Which one went in first?
So what is snapshot was there first?
Okay.
Clone was added later.
History wrong.
It just that one was just move faster. So that's maybe why you remember that one.
So who did the snapshot work back in 115, 114, whenever that happened?
No, 1.12. Snapshot was added in 1.12, right? But of course, John Griffiths added some other changes. I don't remember the, the remove the incorrect. That might be there from the beginning.
Okay.
Probably just
Well,
I was
yeah, I was
told
gonna
to
say,
do that when I, added that hard.
whoever initially added the data source field presumably added this admission controller logic, and I don't know who it was, and I don't know why they did it. So we're gonna have to sort of go back in history to figure that out. But
I doubt there was any like specific reason. Just I think because I was also just got introduced to that code.
yeah.
And I probably just followed some other code paths and just did that same way, and then got approved. But I don't think there was any. I don't think there was any specific writing saying what we should do for that. I don't think that's the case. So
I do recall that, while we had very specific desire to get snapshot and restore from snapshot in, we didn't want to do it in a way that would be specific to snapshots. We wanted to do it in a more generalized way, which is why the field has the structure it does, where you could specify a data source, which is a Kubernetes object. So like there was we were in a weird situation where like we were hurrying to get snapshot support in because that was imperative. We wanted to leave the door open for other types of populators, but we didn't have a good grasp at the time of what that would look like.
Hurried. I think at that time we make it very, very strict. That's team specific ask us to make it extremely strict, right? So
right. So what I think here's my guess, not knowing. We could go back and look at the commit history, but probably what happened is initially it was added with little validation, just like here's an object, you can put whatever you want there. Somebody objected and said, hey, what if someone puts garbage? And so we had to add some kind of logic to validate it.
I think that type of validation should be there from the beginning.
Yeah. No, I'm saying like before the commit merged, right? Someone submitted a PR, said, here's the data source field. There's no validation. Somebody probably objected to that suggestion, said, you have to validate this field. You can't just let people put whatever they want in here. And so an agreement was probably reached to say, well, for now, it's just going to be snapshots, and later we'll relax it to add more things. And then later the volumes were added too. But probably it was that decision to say, well, we need to validate this field, but we're going to relax it over time, that led to this decision to say, well, if it's something that's not recognized, we're just going to blank it out. And maybe that was an ill-considered decision, or maybe, again, I don't know, like maybe the person who did it didn't even intend for that to happen. It just happened by accident. But it's what's been shipping for a while, and so now we got to figure out how to extricate ourselves from that API behavior, because yeah, it's really bad. I think that if you turn this feature gate on, so the thing I was emphasizing in my feedback to Tim is when you turn this any data source feature gate on, it basically stops doing that for anything except core API objects. And maybe to make Tim happy, we should change it so that if you specify a core API object, like it actually rejects your PVC, which would be a non-backwards compatible change, but maybe one that's for the better. So, and if that is what Tim believes is a better solution, then we're back to saying, well, maybe this data populator controller should be a validating webhook that will reject other things that aren't valid. Maybe.
And so just to make sure I understand this proposal, it's if this flag is off for the feature flag, then there's some admission controller that will, instead of just clearing out the field if it's invalid, will actually just reject the PVC.
No. If it's off, which is how it is today, the existing admission controller just accepts the PVC but blanks out the field.
Right. I'm saying the new proposal that you're saying,
okay. Well,
to work around this.
Yeah, my existing proposal is to just not blank out the field and allow anything in, and then to generate events after the fact to tell you that what you submitted isn't going to bind, at least not yet. We had the discussion about why that's desirable, because it could be the case that you're after you create your PVC, you're going to go install the rest of the stuff required to populate that PVC, and it would be nice just to be able to eventually get your app up and running without having
the order of creation shouldn't matter. Yep.
Right. So that was the reason we went with this asynchronous approach. And I explained that in detail to Tim in that last email.
Mhm.
Or actually, no, I think I put it right here at the bottom of the GitHub thread, didn't I? Oh no, I put it in the PR itself. That's where it is. Man. Oh, okay. I got to find the last commit. This commit. Yeah, I added an alternative validating webhook at the bottom and said one alternative was considered was the validating webhook, yada yada, and I explained why we rejected that proposal in the last commit. So I tried to spell out our reasoning here for not doing the webhook, but it still doesn't talk about what how core Kubernetes should handle data sources that are still definitely not valid. Like if you put a config map as the data source of a PVC, like today it just gets ignored, and even tomorrow with the feature gate turn on, it will still just get ignored, and you'll get an empty volume. Or if you put a pod, or if you put a load balancer, I mean, there's all kinds of things you could put as the data source of a PVC, and if the API group is the empty string, we'll treat it specially on the Kubernetes side. And
if it's invalid and it's like obviously invalid, you put in, like you said, a config map or something. Provisioning is still going to be blocked, right? And you'll get an event.
No, so like I was saying, the existing behavior is the field just gets zeroed out and you get an empty volume. With the new feature gate, I changed the behavior for everything except the empty API group, which I preserved the old behavior of just give you an empty volume.
Got it.
So
okay, so then if we modified that condition to be fail, like this is not allowed, then that seems like it is a backwards compatible way of going towards where we want to go.
Well, but it's
right?
not, because today someone could be putting garbage in that data source field and relying on the fact that it's getting ignored. I mean, of course, it's an insane thing to do, but you could be doing it now. And if we change this, that will stop working.
Got it. So if this feature flag gets enabled, suddenly what used to work for them no longer works, even though technically they shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, they should. If what they wanted was an empty volume, they shouldn't have put garbage in the field.
Right? We can't say every bug is behavior that we need to support moving forward, right? We can say that's a bug.
We could take that stance, but this is a bug that's been in for like 8 releases now, so who knows?
It's a bug.
Yeah. So that was one of the big points of contention, was like, what do we do about this existing bad behavior that everyone agrees is bad, but it's we're trying to be backwards compatible with it to the extent possible, and we could change that stance, and then and if we do change our stance to say no, we don't want to allow these things to go in if they're invalid, we actually want to reject them, then we're back to the validating webhook. But that presents the problems that I spelled out here in the alternative section of the KEP. So that is an issue for Tim, I think. But there was some other issues he brought up that I wanted to go over, or maybe just one. I've got to go through. Okay. Yeah, he had asked about SIG security. It didn't occur to me to reach out to them, and it's probably too late to get a hold of them now. I don't know. I mean, clearly there are some subtle security implications to what we're doing, because the act of creating volumes from data sources implies, accessing data that you might not have access to, or at least somebody might want to have more control over whether you're allowed to do this or not than we provide by default. So I don't know what we need to do about the security aspect of this design.
Yeah, I think at least we can respond to the question about why the controller has events rather than synchronous, asynchronous. But for the SIG security question, I think we'll have to push back on Tim and let him know, like, well, if we need that now before we go to beta, then this KEP is not going to make it, and we will have to wait a cycle.
Yeah, I mean,
is that a hard requirement or not?
a little bit about the security implications, and it is the case that like data sources have to be in the same namespace as the PVC that is being created from the data source. So like at least we have namespace control. So there's a modicum of security, but I haven't thought about it much deeper than that.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that. I guess for beta, would it be automatically on by default? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that's part of the concern.
Yeah, the feature gate will be on. We'll have to tell deployers and distros that like this is a CRD and a controller you need to include for correct behavior. Because if you just turn the feature gate on and you don't provide the controller, you're back in the boat if you create a PVC and nothing happens and you don't get any feedback. So that was the point of the requiring that controller to exist. And similarly, like if a third party wanted to actually create a data populator and make it available with Kubernetes 121, like it's not going to work without that CRD being present, the volume populator CRD. So, and again, we don't want to end up in the situation we had with snapshots where like we have vendors shipping or installing the CRD automatically or something, because that caused a lot of clashes, between multiple implementations trying to install the same CRD or trying to install a controller. And we don't want to replay what happened with the snapshot controller back in the alpha days. That's the other concern with it going to beta, is that like that needs to be handled in this release cycle. Some sort of a communication to distros that this is something you have to include when you spin 121. And we have to have releases and everything available by the end. I guess by the end of this release cycle, we have to have a release of the volume or the data source validator controller and the CRD that is associated with it, so that everyone can start consuming it. There was one other thing that he brought up about metrics. This comment here. So he was interested in like collecting how long it takes for PVCs to bind, and making some judgments based on that. And I actually think it's an interesting metric to have for all PVCs, whether there's a populator involved or not, right? Just knowing the time it takes to go from the PVC being created to it binding for empty PVCs, for snapshot clones, for volume clones, all of those numbers are very interesting to collect histograms of. And it seems like a generalized SIG storage problem, to collect metrics on PVC bind times, right? So that was my response, is that this is something we need to take back to the larger SIG and say, we have a gap here with metrics. It might be very interesting to collect this type of metric and to do it in a consistent way across all provisioners.
So I think there is some sort of metrics around how long it takes to provision. Can't remember the details of it, but we have something, and I think it's something along the lines of, I think there's like two sets of metrics. One measures the inner loop of like when a individual provision call happens, how long does that take? And then there's like a second call, which measures the end-to-end time, including the retries.
You're talking about the RPC call to the CSI sidecar.
There's that, and then on the Kubernetes PVC controller side, there's also some metrics.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say the central PVC controller, the one that binds the PVs and the PVCs. That's sort of the where I was thinking. You would like to have a timer from the time it saw the PVC to the time that it got bound.
Yeah, so I believe there is some metric there, and potentially it could be extended to have more dimensions, for example.
Okay, but I mean, I see what you're saying. You're saying if you just have a general metric and you can't filter it by like how long did the empty volumes take, how long did the volumes with data sources take, how long did each type of data source take?
Yeah.
Okay, that would be and then that's a little bit trickier to do in the core, because then the thing that's collecting the metrics has to introspect the data source field of every PVC and sort of,
which I think is possible. Like I
yeah.
think Prometheus allows just for like an arbitrary dimension to be added, where you can just start throwing in, possible values. As long as it's a relatively small set of bounded values, it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, it would just be the key in that extra dimension would be the group kind of
Yep.
the object that was in the data source. And then there'd be a special one for no data source, which could just be the empty string, I guess, if you're allowed to use the empty string as a key.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So yeah, that might just be a general piece of Kubernetes work that anyone in SIG storage could work on. We can propose it during the next Thursday meeting. So yeah, so we responded to all of these comments, and we're waiting for the reply. And I don't know what else to do between now and then.
Okay, I think let's give it our best shot and see where it lands. If not, we'll end up having to push this out a quarter, worst case.
Okay.
But at the very least, at least we'll have a understanding of where we want to be and get consensus, and we can even start working on it early and get it checked in early next quarter.
If for whatever reason Tim doesn't approve it today, but like we're able to get him on board with our ideas quickly, is this the kind of thing we would ask for an exception for and maybe merge it a little later?
Potentially, yeah. If it's only a matter of a few days, then definitely.
Okay. Because yeah, that thought occurred to me, is that like, everyone understands that this is basically ready to go, and we're just trying to get everything in the KEP sorted out.
Yep.
And it shouldn't be a big deal if it merges later than the week, but that's a policy decision for the community. Okay, so we're gonna try, and I'll just watch my emails for anything from Tim.
Yeah, it looks like he sent another one right before this meeting. So.
Oh yeah, okay. I'll have to check that one out. Let's see here. What just happened? Oh, my email. I got tons of email. Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, he says, now that we have arbitrary data sources, who's to say I can't make a data populator that runs from a pod?
So I think the answer to that is like you can, but you still need to create a volume populator object for it, right?
Well, no.
Like it's arbitrary to an extent.
We're very specifically excluding core objects. Like I think what we'd be saying is if that's what you want, like you need an intermediate object that snapshots the pod, and then you use that as your data source. To directly refer to a running pod would have very weird semantic implications, right? Like we kind of made the judgment that like all the core objects are off limits except for PVC for data populators. And if we want to revisit that decision, then yeah, we have to sort of propose full relaxation of the admission controller logic to include the empty API group, and just let anything in. So yeah, you could just point a PVC at a pod, and if somebody had written a populator that understood how to do that, like it would just work. But like, yeah. There's just a question of who has control over the populator for pods, because you could have multiple competing implementations. Like how do we decide which is the canonical one? If populators
So
are just
is
things that
my
exist out of tree.
understanding here incorrect when I think I was assuming if you have any sort of populator in this new design, you need to register a CR of the type volume populator that says for this kind, I am the populator.
Yes.
And so if you have, if you expand that potentially to allow for kinds that are core, the problem of who owns it would be basically whoever the first one is that claims it effectively.
Well, no, unfortunately, the way that the volume populator CRD works is there's nothing to stop you from having two registered with the same group kind. That
I see.
And there's no way to determine who wins.
And that's the case regardless of whether it's a core object or not.
Right.
And if that happens for non-core objects, what's the expected behavior?
they'll fight and you'll get a really bad result.
Is
They'll
there any
both.
way that we could add validation that says, every time an object is created, I guess that requires cross-object validation?
Yeah, I was gonna say I would like to have a validating webhook on the. We actually talked about this. We when we were doing the validating webhook, we said, well, we can both validate the PVCs and we can validate the volume populators themselves if we want to. And then we backed away from doing a webhook at all and saying, well, we'll just do a controller. And so then the question was, well, do we still want the webhook just for the volume populator validation case? Because it seems like such a minor corner case, and to require a whole webhook just to solve that problem felt like overkill.
So then it can still, can we do anything at runtime to at least not prevent bad things from happening?
So unfortunately, I think even if we had the webhook to prevent two volume populators from claiming the same group kind, having the existence of the volume populator doesn't control whether the populator can do its work. The populator can still function even if there is no volume populator object, because all it's doing is it's a PVC controller that's watching PVCs, reacting to them, and binding PVs to them. And if two of them decide to react to the same PVC, you will get bad results, I think. So it's kind of up to the administrator to not install two populators that will fight with each other.
I'm thinking this is similar to, I guess, if you have two storage classes and they both are named differently. Well, I guess that's different, and have the same provisioner because they are actually different.
This would be the case if you had two CSI drivers that both picked the same driver name and you installed them both.
Right.
That's how you would get into trouble, because then they would both fight over the same PVC when it came in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just sort of rely on vendors not to ever pick the same CSI driver name. And if anyone ever does, we rely on admins not to be dumb enough to install both of them.
Right. And so CSI specifically says that the name that driver vendors pick should be a fully qualified domain name, hoping to prevent collisions.
Yes. So the theory is the same here, is that,
Mm-hmm.
nobody should be writing populators for the same Kubernetes object. And when you write a populator, you should be defining a new object. I guess that was my justification for excluding the core group, is that
Got it.
Is that anyone who's writing a populator is definitely going to make a new CRD that they're going to use as their data source. No one would ever write a populator for something that already existed, because that would be a weird thing to do. It wouldn't make sense. But if it does start to make sense in some way that I can't see, then we do have this issue of how do you make sure that you don't end up with two that are
I think
reacting
that's a valid concern. So I would say push back on that and say, let's start off with this tighter kind of validation here. Keep core out of it because of this issue of collisions that can happen. It can happen with any data source, but it's much more likely when you have core objects. That combined with the fact that we don't really have a real use case for directly doing any core objects, let's keep it tighter and exclude that. If in the future we find that that's too strict, we can relax that restriction somehow. It's always easier to relax than to reapply.
And if someone could articulate, this is how you create a PVC from a pod, my response would be, well, okay, let's define a new object that specifies the pod name in the pod namespace, or just the pod name, and assume it's in the same namespace, and then use that as the data source, rather than trying, so add a level of indirection so that, the type of the object that provides the indirection tells you how to make the volume from that pod. And then if someone else comes in and makes a different type of volume from the same pod, they can use a different object name and work around the collision that way. So
right.
by adding a level of indirection with some other object.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
yeah, that seems reasonable.
All right, I'll I guess I'll just respond to Tim Hawkins' email and maybe copy it into the GitHub, and see if we can convince him. So that's sort of where we are today. I don't have anything other than trying to get the KEP merged. Does anyone else have any other questions about the KEP or the status of things? Xing, you had some questions right at the beginning of the meeting before we started recording. Did I cover all of them?
I think, yeah, I think so. It's really just about the KEP, what are still remaining. I think just what questions that the team raised.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kicking myself for not engaging Tim earlier. I like, part of me knew that waiting was a bad idea, but I have too much stuff going on. So it's hard to prioritize. So it's my
no
fault.
worries.
But
I think Tim took a look at the cozy design as well, and he has concerns there. So you're not in this alone.
That's a huge KEP.
Yeah.
I've been in all the cozy meetings, and they're not too optimistic.
Yeah.
But they're trying to. Okay. Well, that's all I have for today. I'll get back to it, and yeah, I'm basically assuming that tonight is the deadline, and if we somehow miss it, I do intend to try for an exception if I can, wrap things up, within the next few days.
Okay, sounds good to me. Yeah, feel free to hit me up with email if you need anything from me.
Well,
and I'll
how
keep
about
an eye
Slack?
on.
Because I will need you to put your approval back on.
Sure, and I'll actually keep an eye on the email thread between you and Tim. I actually noticed the emails before I noticed Slack. So
okay, I'll remember that. Thanks, everyone.
I can help as well. If Tim approves, then I can also help approve.
Okay,
perfect.
Thanks, Xing.
Thank you both.
All right.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.